and she joins us right now live from Victoria, British Columbia, one of the best women's bantamweights in the world, Sarah Kaufman. Sarah, welcome back to the show.
Oh, it's always great to talk to you guys.
Well, it's great to talk to you, Sarah, and, we were just talking about the UFC women's bantamweight division, and I went over to UFC.com this evening, and I checked out the division to see how many fighters were listed on that roster. You want to wager a guess how many fighters are currently signed to the UFC bantamweight division officially on UFC.com?
I would say one or two.
It would be two. Does that surprise you at all? It surprises me, considering there are so many great fighters from Strikeforce that we figured were coming over to the UFC.
I think that UFC and Zuffa, they had a lot of agreements with Showtime and the Strikeforce, and I'm not sure contractually what they were allowed to do in terms of pulling fighters over at what point. They're definitely going to have to open up the division, and I mean, the 135 division is a huge packed division, and as of right now, they only have the one fight that's set to go at 135 pounds. And I'm excited to see that fight, Ronda and Liz. I actually think it should be a good matchup, and I definitely am looking to do my best to get on those UFC shows, especially with having so many Canadian shows. And, I would love to fight, especially, 158 in Montreal for, my Canadian fans. I haven't really had the opportunity to fight on Canadian soil much since I initially started fighting with Strikeforce.
And, of course, that brings us to UFC 158. Have you heard anything? I put it out on Twitter last week. You retweeted it. It got a lot of support online. It seems like people want to see you fight here in Montreal. Have you heard anything from the UFC on that end?
On my end, I haven't. But I know that the UFC, they're constantly putting fights together, and Joe Silva and Sean Shelby are always kind of at talking in meetings and trying to get fights put together and fights that the fans want. And I was really excited to see the support, that fans have shown for me, both Canadian and the worldwide fans, trying to get me on, into the UFC. And, over in the last week, as we were talking, just trying to get onto 158, it would be a kind of a dream to fight in the UFC, especially on Canadian soil.
And we hope to see you here on that card. But I got to be honest, I'm looking at the card, and fights seem to be added every day to this card. And you know just as well as I do, UFC cards, 12, maybe 13 fights max. And we're looking at this card, 8 or 9 fights are official at this point. We're kind of running out of room.
Yeah, and the card is coming up pretty soon. So, I think if the fans, they've pushed for it, and I think if more people, kind of voice that they want to see me fight in the UFC in Canada, especially in Montreal, such a huge fight city. I mean, I would be so honored to fight there. But it's not up to me. But, I think the UFC listens to fans, and they put on fights that they want to see and that they're going to try and see, pushing a division forward. And I definitely think that, my presence would help push a division forward. Granted, my last performance was not a performance at all, and Ronda shined in that fight, and I just was really slow out of the gate and got caught faster than I was even awake. So it's my fault that I made a huge lapse in speed and timing, in the minute of our fight, and Ronda really capitalized. But other than that, I still feel like I have a huge fan base, and there's a reason I've been the champ, and I'm going to be the champ again.
And, you're a former champion, and, like you mentioned, you have a huge fan base, so I think it would be very wise of the UFC to put you on this card here in Montreal. The first time I ever saw you fight, Sarah, was actually at the Bell Center, and you were very successful, and I knew from that moment that you were somebody not to mess with in the women's division. You were definitely a serious fighter. Is it difficult for you not knowing at this point?
I think it's always hard as a fighter, and especially, knowing what I've, tried to push for throughout my career and trying to get, some legitimacy for the females and really push the females in the Strikeforce divisions and trying to get us on main cards and as much exposure as we can. Of course I'd want to be the first female fight in the UFC. I mean, that's such a milestone, such a big moment. But, I think it's a big moment in general for the females that they are in the UFC now. And, you can't just have two people in a division. They're going to have to build up that division. And I know that Sean Shelby and Joe Silva they're really supportive of the females, and they're really excited by matchups. I think it's just a matter of fitting them onto the cards and putting together the most exciting fights. They're going to help the divisions, kind of perpetually keep going and have fans excited and meet new people and as I say, just show new talent, which there is out there. And, aside from the UFC, Invicta's been doing a great job. I don't know if you guys got to watch the card that was on Saturday, but there were some amazing fights from some amazing females that Shannon Knapp has put together.
Yeah, definitely a great card. It was very, very successful. It even crashed Ustream. I mean, to crash Ustream, it's very impressive, right? And it just shows you how big female mixed martial arts is getting. It just shows you where this sport can go and how much support there is for it. That's why it kind of baffles me when I know that Ronda Rousey's fight is just a little over a month away, and we still don't know who the second fight will be as far as women in the UFC. It's just, I don't understand it. You mentioned Invicta, and there have been rumors that you would actually fight at their next card in April. Is that something that you're entertaining? Is that a possibility?
There's a couple things I'm entertaining. Ultimately, my goal, and I think all fighters, regardless of male or female, the goal is to get to the UFC, and kind of make it to the big show and, get that exposure and fight at that high level. But Invicta, as I say, has been putting on these great fights. And, I really like Shannon Knapp. We have a great relationship. And she and Strikeforce or Zuffa have had a really a positive kind of working relationship where they've used, Zuffa contracted fighters when Zuffa hasn't been able to use them. And so depending on what happens, I'd love to fight for Invicta, sometime in the future, whether it's April or May or June or tomorrow. I just like fighting, and she puts on great fights. I'm just really excited for what happens in my future. But, if I can get on that Montreal card, I couldn't turn that down. That would be an amazing opportunity. And as I say, such an honor and a dream, kind of come true to fight in the UFC, but also, on home soil.